Hello, everyone. Welcome to 25th Time of the Writer Festival, organized under the theme Beyond Words, Memory, Imagination, and Conscience. My name is Siphiwo Mahala. I'm going to be in conversation for the next hour with Fred Khumalo in what we call our lunch hour conversations. So Fred Khumalo is a writer, accomplished novelist, experienced journalist, and columnist who grew up in Mpumalanga, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga township, not province, in KwaZulu-Natal. He's the author of 6 novels, 5 in English and 1 in isiZulu. I have some of those here with me. The first novel came out in 2006. It's called Beaches Brew, 7 Steps to Heaven, Dancing the Dance Drill, The Longest March, as well as Ngenxa Yemendi, which is a novel related to Dancing the Dance Drill, however, is not a translation because he also wrote the translation of the book under the title Sisina Ngengoma Yokufa. Welcome, Ndungwa. You've been writing so much. How many books in total have you written now?
Afternoon, Dr. Mahala, and afternoon to the viewers and listeners at home. Thank you for the opportunity. I've published 15 books altogether, starting obviously with the novel that you referred to, Beaches Brew, in 2006. So I write long fiction, long form fiction, that is novels. I write short stories, I write pieces of journalism and so on. And I write in my mother tongue, isiZulu. So yeah, that's what I've done over the past 14 years, writing these books.
Yeah, well, talk about 14 years because I was there when you won the EU award for Beaches Brew.
Yes.
But before we get there, tell us about your journey. You sat at the feet of the legendary Mafika Gwala. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's been a long and convoluted journey, so I'll try and truncate it. I was in high school and my class teacher, Mr. Mungwe, who also taught us English, had seen some of my scribblings, which I mistook for short stories and poems. And he thought there was a spark of brilliance there, but it needed to be properly channeled. Even though he was a good English teacher or teacher of English, he wasn't a writer himself. But he had a friend in the person of Mafika Gwala. And I come from a small township. I knew of this guy, but I never imagined that our paths would cross. But Mr. Mungwe introduced me to Mafika Gwala when I was in standard 9, which is today's grade 11. And I met this man, I showed him my scribblings, my poems and short stories. And he thought there was something there that needed to be channeled. So that's how I got started. And he is the person who suggested that if I wanted to be a writer who gets paid for his scribblings, maybe I should start off as a journalist. So after matric, I went to Natal Technikon, today's Durban University of Technology, where I studied journalism back then. And that's how I got started as a writer, in terms of journalistic terms, but also as a creative writer.
Yeah, and talking about that, in 2006, you published 2 books, one in fiction and the other in autobiography. Yeah, so now this gives you 14 years of publishing books. And you've published 15 books in 14 years. How did this happen?
I'm a compulsive worker, and thanks to my training as a journalist, I write pretty fast. And again, I owe it to journalism that I don't wait for inspiration before I write. So sometimes I force myself to write, even if the spirit is not willing. And I scribble something, and some of my scribblings never make it to publication, but they become some kind of a gem from which I can build a story later. So I consider every scribbling I produce every day not a lost opportunity. Those that don't make it into a short story or a novel that I'm working on will be kept in a folder that I would refer to later. Sometimes they become a short story later. So, I mean, look, I always use the analogy of a football player. A football player maybe plays 4 matches per month, but he is on the pitch maybe 20 days per month and perfecting his skills, scoring goals, fake goals against his teammates and so on. So a conscientious and focused football player practices his craft. So why shouldn't I, as a writer, do the same? So that's how I explain my productivity, because I'm always writing. And so that keeps me on my toes. And yeah, that's why I can produce or publish on average a book a year.
And in the process, you make us look like underachievers because we've been together on this journey, but you can't be as productive as you are. It's okay. But tell me, when do you decide that now I'm going to write in isiZulu, and why do you even bother writing in isiZulu for that matter?
I've always wanted to write in isiZulu because I felt many Black writers who are proficient in our African languages, be it in isiXhosa, isiZulu, and so on, were enriching English at the expense of their own languages. However, there were problems, there were challenges facing us as Black writers. There were no publishing houses prepared to publish what we felt we wanted to write. So if you wanted to write in isiZulu back then when I was growing up, you had to write stuff that you couldn't really relate to. I was born in a township, but all the books that I read growing up at school spoke about goat herders or men or boys swimming in rivers, stuff that I couldn't relate to because I was born in a township. And that is the stuff that I was told would be acceptable to the various departments of education from a writer writing in an indigenous language. So that was it was very discouraging and disenchanting. So I thought, okay, let me continue writing in English, which is more open-minded and so on. So when things began to change in the country politically, we did see the corresponding transformation of some sort creeping into the publishing industry as well. You are a beneficiary of that change as well, because you write in isiXhosa and in English as well. So now we can write the stories that we feel strongly about in our languages. So I will be writing more in my mother tongue. So when do I decide when to write in isiZulu? I think it depends on the story that I think needs to be told. That will resonate immediately with the community that I'm writing to.
Okay. And now, I've always argued that literature is not just about knowing the language. It has to be meshed with imagination. And therefore, being a good journalist does not necessarily mean you'll be a good writer of fiction and all of that. An example, for instance, someone like, for me, Louis Ngosi is probably the best essayist of his generation. But as a novelist, he hasn't lived up to the same standard. Very few people straddle the literary and the journalism realm with ease. And in our generation, you are that person. How do you manage that?
No, it's not as easy as it seems. As a journalist and as a newspaper columnist, I come up with an idea, and I think, let me write this. And maybe 4 or 5 pages later, I realize that this is so journalistic. It's not going to be a short story. So I throw it in the basket that I will consider later for essays, because I write essays as well. So straddling the divide is a blessing and a challenge, or a curse at the same time, because the journalist in me says, hey, get this thing out of the way, get this story out of the way as soon as you can. And then I start writing, and then I realize this is going to bore people who are expecting me to use my imagination. And so I keep hitting those necks every now and then. But in the process, I learn. So that's why I have devised a strategy whereby at any given time, I work on 2 projects, a fictional project and a non-fictional project. Hey. So when I get stuck with a novel, I go to my non-fictional mode. That's why you're shaking your head.
We'll never catch you.
So that's why if you go back 14 years ago, I published 2 books in 1 year, and a work of nonfiction, Touch My Blood, and the novel, British Blue. And years later, I published 2 books of nonfiction and 2 books of fiction in 1 year, because at that time I was lucky. I didn't have lucky in the sense that I did not have a full-time job. I was no longer with the Sunday Times, which was so demanding. So I was sitting at home really writing for myself. So I could manage to flit between these 2 projects, nonfiction and fiction. So it works for me. So there are no days where I say, I can't write, I have writer's block. Because if I'm stuck with that nonfiction work that I embarked upon, then I can always take solace in the fiction work that is in the making as well.
I see Joanne Hitchens here is echoing my sentiments. She says, yes, shame on you, Fred, for making us other way less prolific writers look bad. You know, I must confess at this stage that when you went back to City Press, I celebrated, not because you had gotten a job, but because you'll write less and we'll manage to catch up. But there's no hope. And also, maybe the other confession I must make is that when you wrote A Bitch's Brew, I was quite curious because of this perception that I had that journalists are not always the best novelists. At the same time, you wrote Touch My Blood. And I was saying, no, Fred is too young to write an autobiography. And Touch My Blood remains one of my top favorite books by you, ironically. And just to remind you, those watching, I'm in conversation with lunch hour conversation with Fred Khumalo. We're gonna be together until 2:00. So feel free to send in those messages in the inbox. We'll read them towards the end. And also Fred Khumalo was actually our first cover boy in Imbiza. This was the first issue of Imbiza, which came out on the 1st of April last year. Mdungwa, congratulations on your latest novel, 2 Tons of Fun.
Thank you.
It's also music related, and I find it fascinating that you like, naming your books after songs. You were at some point obsessed with Miles Davis.
Still am.
Beaches Brew and Seven Steps. And then why Two Tons of Fun now, if you still are?
Yes, well, my musical tastes are pretty eclectic. I have hundreds of records in this house. Well, the bulk of them are jazz, because that's my preferred genre. But I've got reggae, I've got soul, and so on. Two Tons of Fun alludes to a band from the late 70s, early 80s, when I was growing up in KZN. So this band, basically two ladies, who were pretty well proportioned. They were big, you would say fat, but they were comfortable in their skin. They were happy. So these days of body shaming, these ladies are still alive, by the way. They're much older, but they sing every now and then. But instead of being ashamed of their bodies, they decided to draw attention to their size, to their bodies. That's why they called themselves Two Tons of Fun. And maybe some of you will remember their hit, Just Us, Just Us, Dodo, Just Us, Dodo, Dumbo, 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 Dumbo. I'm a failed musician.
We're gonna lose viewers. Please don't sing.
So those ladies inspired the title, in the sense that the main protagonist in the novel are also two young ladies who also are big proportioned. They are teenagers growing up in Alex. So that's where the title to the novel comes from. But I shall pause there and we have a conversation about what the book is all about, and we can talk about that.
Okay, maybe you should give us a synopsis before I get to it. Or rather, maybe let's talk about the two terms, Lerato and Janine.
Yes.
How difficult or how easy was it for you to write a whole novel from the perspective of 14-year-old girls? Your daughters are much older than that. So how did you arrive at that idea of writing from first a perspective of a girl and this young?
Yes, it wasn't the first time I wrote a whole novel from the perspective of a woman. Remember, my very first novel, Beaches Brew, is written from this perspective of a woman as well, cis lady. But cis lady I could relate to because she was my age, and a lot of the stuff that you saw in the novel, it was kind of autobiographical stuff that I observed growing up in the township, how women of that age related to their men and to their families and children. Now, embarking on this project, writing this novel, which is very contemporary, it's happening now in Alex, with a township that is beset with all these problems. So now telling that story from the perspective of these two young women who are 14-year-olds from two diverse backgrounds in terms of class structure, education, and so on. It was a challenge. It was a challenge, but I relied a lot on conversations that I had had over the years with my daughters, because I'm the one who used to drop my daughters off to school every morning or fetch them from school. And they would tell me stories about the girls that they interacted with from different racial, cultural, and economic backgrounds. So I would listen to that. And of course, I would observe and listen to them as they listened to their music. And I would listen to them dissing other kids about their fashion sense, you know. So it comes through in the book. So the book, these two teenagers are talking about music, they are talking about boys, they are talking about fashion, they are talking about stuff that touches their lives. So yeah, it was challenging, but also rewarding to reconnect with my daughters, so to speak, through these stories, you know, through these nuggets of anecdotes that they used to tell me as we drove from school and so on. So yeah, it was challenging, but also rewarding. But I was nervous as well. Did I get the stories correctly? Did I? Well, in the writing of the book, I would every now and then consult with my daughters. They are in their early 20s now. About the slang, for example, and they would correct me. Oh, no, that slang is out of fashion. Take it out, it's out of fashion. No. A girl will never wear a Dolce & Gabbana. She will wear this, whatever, you know. So yeah, I had to keep updating some of these things.
Yeah, you even write about, you know, the effects experience of menstruation.
Yes. Yeah. So those kind of sensitive things, I had to think very carefully about. You don't want to offend, but you want to capture, you want to be authentic to the experience of a 14-year-old girl, because you can't pretend she doesn't go through that phase. Because a woman reader will say, okay, what's wrong with this girl? We never get to see her talking about boys. She doesn't have periods. What's wrong with her? So I had to, go into the sensitive corners with due sensitivity and care.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you do mention also that these two girls had very diverse backgrounds. One, you know, her family can afford to eat fried cockroaches, whereas the other the other can barely, you know, have anything to eat. Tell us about the fried cockroaches and other luxuries.
Yeah, so Lerato is from Alex. Very down-to-earth, poverty-stricken household. Her mother has what I call kleptomaniac tendencies, light fingers. You know, that's what she does for a living. She doesn't have a full...
She's the liberator of things.
She liberates things, yeah. So that's what she does. She doesn't have a full-time job. So Lerato grows up in that neighborhood until she meets Janine, who, now living in Alex, lives in a kind of a secluded corner of the township. Her mother is a university professor who traveled all over the world. So obviously she is economically well off compared to the rest of the people in the neighborhood. So one day Lerato gets to spend time at Janine's house, and then she eats these fried cockroaches. By the way, those fried cockroaches are prawns. She didn't know what they were. So they were prawns. That was her first encounter with prawns. So she goes back home and she tells them, oh, I ate those fried cockroaches, but they are not cockroaches. They're nice and blah, 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 blah. So why did I do that? Initially, I wanted, my initial thought was to have a black girl and a white girl. White girl from Sentin, black girl from Alex. To contrast the two worlds. Because my idea for this novel was to look at the inequality in this country. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we saw a UN study which confirmed my long-held suspicions that South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. I've long suspected that, and that's why I decided to write this novel, just to look at the disparities between the two, well, the various sides of our economic equilibrium. No. Continuum, not equilibrium. Continuum. Oh, English. So I wanted to contrast these two worlds, the rich versus the poor. So had I used a white girl to represent the rich side and the black girl, the poor side, it would have been so obvious and maybe even boring. Yes, in the past, race was a class determinant, but that has begun to gradually change. There are super rich Black people. There are highly educated Black people. That's a reality. So I wanted to complicate the picture. Let's get a rich, well-off Black girl versus a poor Black girl from just two sides of this spectrum. One from Alex, the other from the better side of Alex, which I would call a Santi. So I use these two young girls' lives to explore, to interrogate the whole question of inequality and class distinction with amazing results, because the more I delved into this, the more shocked I was as to how different we are. I mean, I live on the poor side of Santi, but when I cross the freeway, I'm in Alex. I can't stop getting shocked whenever I go there to buy stuff, you know, the stuff that we consume. When I go there, I get shocked at the dysfunctionality of that place, the sheer horror of the hygienic states of the township. So I chose Alex because I believe it is the microcosm of many other Alexes all over the country, neighborhoods that have been neglected. That's why I chose Alex.
Well, go to Kwalanga in Cape Town, you'll find the same. So yeah, it's reflective of our society.
Yeah.
I think you juxtapose the two communities very well. And I also see that you are wearing a T-shirt of the longest march. And I'm a bit jealous. Are we gonna see a T-shirt of 2 Tons of Fun?
I hope my publishers are listening. I hope they are listening. Yes, I would love T-shirts of the 2 Tons of Fun.
Let's hope they are listening. By the way, 2 Tons of Fun is published by Umuzi.
Yes.
Is Umuzi still part of the Random House family?
Yes. As far as I know, yes. Okay. They published The Longest March. They also published Dancing the Death Drill and Touch My Blood.
Mm. Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. So the largest part of your body of work is there. Yeah. But back to the book. Florence dies largely because of mistrust between her and her mother.
Yes. And
how important do you think this trust is, or how parents relate to their children, as a general statement?
Yeah. When I complicated that part of Lerato's family by making Florence very rebellious against her mother, I wanted to highlight the perennial problem of absentee fathers. Because Florence becomes the person that she becomes because she's very angry, with her mother, and obviously angry as well with her absent father, or the father is there, he has started a family elsewhere. So Florence is very angry, and she gets triggered when her mother invites yet another man to come and live with them. And she, even though she has been reassured or been told by both her mother and her sister Lerato that this man is our real uncle, and Florence doesn't believe. She's given up on her mother. She says, no, how many uncles do I have in this world, mother? And then she leaves the house, she absconds, she runs away. I don't want to give away the whole story, but yeah, with disastrous results. So by complicating that aspect of the story, I wanted to highlight the perennial issue of absentee fathers, especially in the Black community.
Yeah, and the uncle becomes famous for his shoes. What inspired that character?
Okay, no one in particular, but the whole that vignette, that slice of life that relates to the polishing of the shoes. Every Black person of my age can relate to that, because when we were growing up in the township, it was some almost a competition that on a Sunday afternoon, the clever guys, the well-dressed guys in the hood would sit outside their yard and play their music, be it soul or jazz, and put their collection of shoes outside in the yard and start polishing. It became a ritual, and some guys were champions of that art. So some people from the neighborhood would bring their own shoes and say, "Bra so and so, can you do a shine work on my thing?" And they would reward the guy with a quart of Black Label or Castle, whatever beverage he preferred. So it was something that was a ritual, and I believe it still happens in some parts of the country, in some townships, because polishing shoes is an art. It's an art, you know. So I just wanted to.
Maybe I should be more specific to say we have a Fred Khumalo here who's supposed to be an artist. Yet when I look at you, you don't look like an artist. You don't have a beret, you don't have dreadlocks, and you are clean. Why is that?
And you would have noticed that when I do my book launches, I'm invariably in a suit and a bow tie. I'm just being playful, but I hate the stereotype of the crazed, turkeyed, Dangari dressed artist who. Now, I don't like the stereotype, you know. Yeah, that's why I'm making the point at my book launches. I'm kind of juged, as they say.
Yeah, and I must say also,
I love clothes. I love clothes. I can't afford them, but I love clothes. I love beautiful clothes.
I see, and I've seen your old photos with pen and all. Yes. But I also feel personally attacked when you know, in one of the conversations in the book, where this character is questioning how one becomes a doctor of books. So I'm going to read quickly from this excerpt. It says, it's on page 114. It says, "You might say I'm a doctor of books. I laughed and dismissed it as part of my daughter's usual banter. But you're confirming this to me now. How can you be a doctor of books? Any fool can pick up books from a box and arrange them nicely on a shelf. When they are torn, she can use sellotape to repair their spines and pages. but a doctor of books. There's a lot of literature and the importance of the culture of reading in the book. Why did you feel the need why do you feel it's necessary to touch on that?
Because I was trying to capture Lerato's transition. Damascene moment. Remember, she comes from an impoverished background and she doesn't care about school. She goes to school because everyone goes to school. And somewhere in the book, she says that exactly. If I stay at home, what would I do staying at home? Because everyone is at school. So when she starts her friendship with Janine, who's got a whole bookshelf to herself in her room, and she's got her own bedroom, then gradually she begins to change her attitude towards education and books. So I bring the whole thing of literature to the fore. And somewhere in the book, I also bring a real life character, the author Mark Matabane. Why did I?
Actually, before you go on that, I wanted to know why you felt the need to bring in the likes of Mark Matabane, Zakes Mda, Silo Ncube, amongst others.
I was trying to say, no matter your background, economically and otherwise, you can rise above that. You can come from a really impoverished background, just like Mark Matabane. Mark Matabane is from Alex, but he got a tennis scholarship because he was good at tennis. He played tennis, got a good education, and he wrote a lot of very highly successful books. At some stage, he had his own TV show in America. He lives in America. So I wanted to say, you can rise above your station. So it's the aspirational or inspirational aspects to the book. To say Lerato looked at her neighborhood and said, if this man, Mark Matabane, came from here, what would stop me? So that is the aspirational or inspirational aspect to the book. So that's why I bring in very surreptitiously the whole issue of reading and literature, that it is not the preserve of educated and rich people in the suburbs. It happens in the township. It happens in the township. I mean, the people that you mentioned, Silo Mahala, your good friend, is from a township. Look where he is now. Mark Matabane is from the township. Look where he is now. And many other iconic people in the arts are from the township, but they said, I'm going to pull myself out of the morass of poverty and reach for my goals without losing touch with their background. I mean, Silo is still in touch with his roots, even though he's up there in the stratosphere, artistically speaking.
Okay. And I mean, you know this. I'm always fascinated by your writing, especially the opening paragraphs. And this one is no different. Actually, perhaps I should start with your very first novel. Do you have it there?
No, I don't. Bitches go, no, I don't.
Okay.
I don't have a copy, sorry.
Okay, the opening paragraph says, when I was growing up, my mother was away from home most of the time. As a result, I grew up, oh no, this is a prelude. Okay, no, I'll get to it. But okay, it says, dear Zakes, some women say it's the feel and not the size of a man's penis that matters. But others say, no, doll, it's the balls behind the penis that matter. because the balls are the engine that drives the whole business down there. That's just 3 lines of the opening paragraph. And 7 steps to heaven. The cockroach crawled across the tabletop, pausing every now and then to probe the air with its antennae. It looks lonely, lost. It was famished. As fate would have it, it stumbled upon a pool of human vomit at the extreme edge of the table. And then it goes on and on and on. But the thing is, your opening paragraphs are always that evocative. And by the way, the first page of 2 Tons of Fun reminded me of 7 Steps to Heaven. But the question I'm trying to get to is why is it important for you to have such evocative opening paragraphs?
Okay, I mean, as a fellow author, you do realize that as writers, we are competing with many other activities that people are exposed to. Instead of reading our humble lines, they could be watching TV, they could be tweeting, they could be doing other things. So I feel it's very important to grab their attention immediately with your very first line, your very first paragraph. You grab them in as much as you can so that they say, okay, let me forget my TV for a while. Let me read. This sounds interesting. So yes, I'm a realist. There are realistic and commercial considerations to this. You want to get as many people's attention as possible. I'm not writing for myself only. I'm a bit of a more of a realist to say, I'm trying to write to appeal to as many people as possible. So I try to polish my openings to the best of my ability.
Okay, thanks. Let me give a chance to all those tuning in who have been sending us messages. The first one is from Elma Shaw, where she says, what a privilege to learn about your process of work ethic. Your process and work ethic, Fred. Thanks for sharing. Okay, this is someone who actually encourages what you are doing to us. And then there is, I read Joanne's comment earlier. There's Siwela Langeni who says, overachiever indeed. Yes, he is. And then there's also Freddie Mabe, who says there is a reason he is called the Brad Pitt of South African writing. Tell me, how did that come about? You being called Brad Pitt of South African writing?
Oh, no. It's got nothing to do with my looks now.
Looks.
No, so we were at Sunyati's launch. She was launching her novel Gold Diggers at exclusive books Rosebank, and one of her friends from Zim, whose name eludes me now, I'm so embarrassed, came up to me and said, I have read your books, and you're so you touch me. No one can ignore your writing. You are the Brad Pitt of South African literature. Well, I never asked her to expatiate, but I said I know it certainly has nothing to do with my looks.
Yeah, Mama Khumalo, I hope she's watching somewhere. She believes it's based on your looks. Yeah. Okay, there's another comment here from Mboafrika wa Mukhati, who says, thank you for touching on mother tongue. And then Siwela Langeni comes back again to says, sounds like art, Fred Khumalo. She might be referring to the polishing of shoes. I don't know. If not, Siwela, please write again. And there's Zunaid Musam, who says, very inspiring, Fred Khumalo. Your prolific and passion for writing is setting a tone for us as writers. Thank you. And then there's Zanele Manyambose, who says, now I need to get a copy. I hope it's a copy of Two Tons of Fun. I can guarantee, Zanele, you'd enjoy it. And Siwela is commending you here for connecting with your daughters. She says, beautiful, the connection with your daughters. And I'm biased here because I also have 3 daughters. I think it's very important that fathers have a very close relationship with their children, and especially daughters. And then there is, lastly, for now, there is Kai Crooks Chisano, who says polishing shoes is an art. Fred Khumalo, I actually visualize this as you said it. Such a nice slice of life. So those are the comments so far. Do you have anything to comment on the comments?
No, I'm just honored that people actually took the trouble to join us here. And people are passionate about this little activity that we engage in the face of many other things that people could be doing with their spare time, that people are still reading. You know, it's very heartening that we are not shooting in the dark, that there are people out there receiving our humble words and lines. It's very, very reassuring.
Okay. Yeah, well, my interest is to get Mondli's number and ask him to load a bit more work to slow you down in writing. But yeah, let's go back to Two Tons of Fun.
Yes.
Early on in the book, there is an incident of an overturned truck. And people, instead of think about rescuing the injured, they think about looting. What is your view on what we can call culture of looting? It may not necessarily be a case of one incident of an accident of an overturned truck, but as a metaphor looking at our society.
Poverty has dehumanized us. Poverty has made us so selfish. Poverty, has turned us into something that we essentially are not. People reading this book after the looting of last year would assume that the book was inspired by the looting of last year. No, the book was written long before. The publishing process takes a long time. So, but the looting that we saw last year is also symptomatic of people's desperation and the precarity that the country is faced with. So it could take anything to trigger something akin to what happened last year, the looting, because people are desperate. So a truck overturning, the driver dying there, bleeding, is secondary to what they can see. They see immediate gratification. They're going to to loot these bottles of cold drink, and then they will sell them later or consume them and entertain themselves. So it's all about me, 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 me. It's the kind of culture that has been brought to bear upon us, I think, by many factors, including the fact that poverty has just dehumanized us. And so the looting manifests itself across the spectrum, across various aspects of our lives. At work, it happens. People stealing stationery. You get stopped at a roadblock. A traffic cop says cold drink, and everything is in order. Your license, your disc, everything is in order. But he will delay you and says, "Oh, I'm really cold drinking, please." You haven't done anything wrong, because there's this sense of entitlement that you are driving a car, which means you are richer than him. That is the insinuation. Therefore, you owe him something. So there is this self of entitlement all over. So people, because as the Chinese people say, a fish rots from the head. So when we saw leadership doing what it did, or what leadership is still doing now, people said, okay, if those people at the top can do it, nothing we can do it at our own level. So the looting cascades from the top to the bottom, and with disastrous results. So the overturning of the truck and the looting that follows is analogous to what is happening in the country, in many aspects of our lives in the country.
Yeah, well, we will take another, we have just over 5 minutes left. We'll take another round of the comments, so please keep them coming. But Ndungwa, related to this subject, on page 97, you say, when Mr. Chikumburi had just been starting out as a businessman, he used to get mugged almost every week. At the recommendation of Mikateko's mother, he'd gone to Bravik to state his case. The next time Mr. Chikumburi got mugged, he managed to use his cell phone to capture the face of the thug and shared the image with Bravik. A few days later, the thug was presented before Mr. Chikumburi, with the thug's face so thoroughly beaten, he was almost unrecognizable. Now, there is also, as a counter strategy, the spirit of vigilantism that is also emerging. Taking this and juxtaposing it with what is happening in our broader society, how do you think this is the best way of handling some of these things?
No, I was not passing judgment here. Well, it's yeah. I was just reporting on stuff that I have seen. The protection fees. It dates back to the 1930s. We saw it in The Godfather in America, and we've seen it in the country as well. It is prevalent long before the Dudula guys. What do they call them? Operation Dudula. The reality of protection fees has been with us for a long time. If you are running a business in the township or even in the suburbs in Cape Town, you need these thugs to protect your business. So that was the case in Alex. Bravik, who was a thug, gets to be the one to charge people for protection fees so they can be left alone. That, of course, it can start from a good place to say, let's protect our own. And then it just goes haywire. Vigilantism is dangerous in the long term. It might come from a good place in the long term, because vigilantes then become a law unto themselves and they become the thugs. So I was putting it out there for people to debate it. Now that, well, this book was written before the emergence or the advent of the Dudula, Operation Dudula people. So readers will make what they want to make of the book in that regard.
Thank you, Prophet Khumalo. I think you've seen these things before they happened. Okay, let's go back to the comments. so that you can squeeze in your response before we finish. Here's one from James Marua, all the way from Kenya, who says, how are you able to produce so many books? Say, I can add so many books in such a short space of time. We discussed this earlier, and clearly James has got the same concern that I have. There's also Joanne Joseph, she's back saying, thank you for your contribution, not just to writing in this country, but in particular, your injection of work into the historical canon. That's Joanne Joseph. And then here's Sedi Kamabe again. He says, please ask Malome if he believes the market of possible readers is mostly enthralled by love story plots, as evidenced by the success of the Shomu book series. Also, is he perhaps concerned at the output of new young writers? And lastly, here is Magwane Imapadi, who says, enjoying the talk, 2 tons of fun, is a definite add to my Fred Khumalo collection. Any quick response to those comments, say?
Thanks, Joanne. Congratulations on your book, Children of the Sugarcane. I believe you are holding a workshop, a writing workshop. Good luck with that. Thank you for your support. Sedi, yeah, people relate easily to romantic things. I mean, we are romantic beings. So you could write a war story, but you must inject some some romance to it, because people relate to those things that touch their emotions, their heart, and so on. So yes, it is my observation that stories with a love theme tend to be more successful. Yeah. Am I concerned about the output of the? I am very thrilled that more people are writing, more young people are writing in this country. The volume of the books that are coming out of the country is just impressive. I'm deluged and flooded by these books. I can't keep up. There's so many of them. Yes, that is encouraging, because that then says to me, there's hope for the written word. There's hope for storytelling, that more and more people are realizing that in the marketplace are stories that they can relate to, stories that that show the people that they are familiar with, so they get mirrored, their lives get mirrored in the works that are being produced by both older and younger readers. I'm very happy with the output that we are seeing at the moment.
Okay, great. Maybe as a parting shot, can you also touch on the publishing platforms? You emerged through a staff writer, and many writers, aspiring writers, are probably wondering how can they get their work published? What would be your advice?
Okay, these days we are blessed in that we have got the internet. There are many websites which are very encouraging, which are open to young writers. The Johannesburg Review of Books is just one of them. There are many others, thankfully, and we have journals like Imbiza, your baby, which accept writers. It is the present day. I would say it is the present day incarnation of staff writer, through which I came as a young and up and coming writer. So what young writers can do is to just Google. I mean, they've got access to the internet, how to get published in South Africa, and they will be flooded with possible outlets that are looking out for their short stories, poems, essays, and so on. The market is far more writer-friendly today than it was 20 years ago.
Thank you so much, Mdungwa. And yeah, it's been great having lunch with you, even though without any food. We'll arrange that for next year. Yeah. Sure. So yeah, time is the enemy. We've overstretched our time a bit. Thanks to the host, Time with the Writer. I will be back personally on Friday with a lunch hour conversation with Zeksimda at 1 o'clock, Friday the 18th. But I believe the program continues. There will be lunch served tomorrow without me. So thank you so much. And thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you.